Welcome back to my channel, guys. Today I'm doing my book review for 2023. It is the end of the year and I read 40 books this year, which I'm super proud of. So I'm gonna go over my favorites and then some of my super favorites, so the elite, my best top ones of the year, and then maybe some honorable mentions, and then lastly a few that kind of didn't hit the spot for me and I didn't enjoy as much as I thought I was going to. So let's get into the books. Okay, so one of my favorite books this year was And Then She Was Gone by Lisa Jewell. Right away, I was just so intrigued by Lisa Jewell's way of writing and the short chapters. I read through this book so quickly, and even though it was a little bit predictable, I still thoroughly enjoyed it. I guess it's a little bit like a psychological thriller. It's not super creepy, a little bit of mystery, but yeah, that was definitely a 5 out of 5 for me. The next one is Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine. It took me a little bit to get into this book and kind of get in the vibes of it, but once I did, I really enjoyed it. The character was really unique, and I think that's what kind of drove the story, and then the twist at the end was just kind of so unexpected, and I really enjoyed it. The next 5-star book that I read this year was The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. This book is so popular, and honestly I didn't know what to expect going into it. I didn't really read what it was about, but it definitely lived up to the hype. I loved the messages about love and fame. Honestly, it was perfection, and it's definitely a 5 out of 5 for me. Okay, The Defining Decade. This was definitely a good book to read this year. I would recommend this to anyone who's in their 20s. Obviously, it's for the 20-somethings, but it was just really interesting and eye-opening and kind of got me stressed, but in a good way. And I found myself really relating to a lot of the things that were talked about in here and wanting to take note and highlight things. So with that being said, that's definitely a good sign, and it was definitely in my top. So next I had Five Survive by Holly Jackson near the top of my list, kind of like favorites of the year, until I read Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. And then, although I still like Five Survive, it definitely got booted down a little bit because Good Girl's Guide to Murder was just so good. I think Five Survive is more like a 4.5 and Good Girl's Guide to Murder is definitely a 5 out of 5. I like the double hit at the end. I don't know if that's what you call it, but where you think you found out what happened and then you just find out more. And yeah, I just really enjoyed it. It wasn't too creepy, which I liked as well. It was still about a murder and mysterious, but yeah, not too creepy. And I definitely want to read the second and third one in the coming year. Okay, next is Every Summer After, and I actually talked about this book in I think my first video, but I just love this book. I feel like it's a little bit harder rating romances, and I either love them or hate them. I never got bored reading this book. I loved the teen vibe. It was very nostalgic, and I feel like I connected to the characters really easily. And even though the end had that little twist, I still really enjoyed it. And I know a lot of people were mad about that, but I don't know. It's still in my top for sure. So my first super favorite for the year is Know My Name by Chanel Miller. This is a memoir about sexual assault, and it was just honestly so moving and really eye-opening to see how unfair the justice system is. I will say it is emotionally a very heavy read, and it is hard to read, so it takes a while to get through it. Besides the story itself being so powerful, the way she writes is really beautiful. The sentences she puts together are perfection, and I just really like the style of writing she does. So I really enjoyed this book. I would recommend it, but again, it is a very heavy read. Okay, my second super favorite of the year, and maybe my most favorite book of the whole year, is Carrie Soto is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid. And I think there's been a lot of hype around this book, maybe even last year and this year, but I loved it so much. Even though I read it in the summer, months ago, I still think about it sometimes. It is essentially about a retired tennis player who is going to go back and start playing again. I loved how realistic the character was and how she wasn't the most likable character. I was super engaged throughout the whole book, even though I don't love tennis. And you would think that reading about a tennis match would be boring. I love the relationship between the daughter and the father and kind of how that changed and evolved and grew. Okay, my third super favorite for this year was Lisa Jewell's None of This Is True. This book came out this year, and I think it's received a lot of hype. A lot of people have talked about it. It's so eerie, and it made me feel unsettled and uncomfortable at times, but the twists were amazing. I love Lisa Jewell's writing. I finished the book in about 2 days just because I was so intrigued and I wanted to know how it was gonna end. And I feel like the ending, some people were like, okay, it didn't really wrap up, but I honestly didn't mind that. And I also really like the whole idea of the podcast and the Netflix documentary. Now for the honorable mentions, the first one is The Lies I Tell by Julie Clark. I talked about this one in a previous video I did, so I'm not gonna go into too much detail. Super easy read, really enjoyed it, and I would recommend it to other people. My next honorable mention is All the Dangerous Things. I really enjoyed this book. I did find I was a little bit disengaged reading it, but I think that was just a me problem and not the actual book. I did really like the unreliable narrator. The end tied up really nicely, and honestly I didn't really see the end coming, but I would definitely recommend this one. I just feel like I would need to reread it to give it a higher rating. The next honorable mention goes to a romance book, and that is Better Than the Movies. I find with romance books, it can be hard for me to have them high up in ratings. Sometimes I lack a little bit of plot, but I really enjoyed that in Better Than the Movies there was more going on than just their romance. There was also her dealing with kind of the death of her mother, and I also loved the music references in it. Those were great. And although it was a little bit cheesy, it wasn't so cheesy that I was cringing. I also think this one would make a really good movie, so I kind of hope they make it into a movie. Now let's talk about a few that didn't hit the spot for me. The first one is Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid. So I didn't love this one, which is a little bit weird because two of her other books are in my very top. But I felt like I was a little bit bored with this one, and my favorite storyline was the one with June and Mick when they're getting to know each other and starting off. But the present one I wasn't really engaged with. I didn't feel connected, and I didn't really like the ending, honestly. I think there was also just like a lack of emotional connection, so I don't know if that was me or the way it was written. But yeah, it didn't really hit the spot. The next one is Meet Me by the Lake, which is super unfortunate because I loved Every Summer After. But yeah, this one also didn't hit the spot. I didn't feel emotional connection, I didn't love the characters, and I feel like there was a little bit of a lack of plot in it. It was kind of just romance and that was it. So unfortunately it was not in my top. So the next one is Billy Summers by Stephen King. I mainly read this because Haley Pham suggested it, and I never read a Stephen King book before, so I don't know. First, it took me a little bit to get into, which is understandable. But I personally did not like how the story took a complete turn in the middle and felt like a different novel after. It's essentially about an assassin, but then another character comes along, and I don't know, the story just takes a 180. The vibes are different, things change. There were also some weird things going on that I just didn't expect. So yeah, I think I need to give Stephen King another chance in 2024. I also did not like the references to COVID. They felt so random and out of pocket, and like he just wanted to add those in there because it was so irrelevant to the story itself. Okay, The Summer of Broken Rules. I really wanted to like this one, and also the cover is so cute. I didn't completely hate it, but I didn't love it. I didn't love the instant love and the whole situation with her ex-boyfriend. I did, however, like the deeper stuff going on with the death of her sister. That was a good touch because without it, I feel like we could have lacked a lot of plot and emotional connection. But overall, it wasn't super engaging, and I don't know, I had high hopes and they weren't met. Okay, one of the biggest flops for me this year was They Both Die at the End. This book, I love the concept and I feel like it had so much potential, but it just did not deliver. I got bored during the book and I feel like I wasn't emotionally connected in a way that when they died at the end, I actually didn't feel anything, which is sad, but it's true. So that was a flop. So lastly, this book I had very mixed feelings about, and that is A Court of Thorns and Roses. Now I know so many people love this book, and I was very excited to read it, and I don't know, like at some parts I was super into it, some parts I wasn't. It was kind of my first fantasy type book I was reading as well, so that might have had something to do with it. I feel like the other books in the series might be better, so I might give those a chance in 2024. I feel like in the end I decided I didn't like it, but still kind of on the fence about it and not really sure. That is the end of my 2023 book review. There were so many more I wanted to talk about and so many I enjoyed, but they just weren't at the top or bottom ends, so I didn't have the chance to. I'll link my Goodreads below, and also comment what your favorite book this year was or a book you want to read in 2024. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in the new year.